This is the video tutorial for section 1C of the Mini Bifold credit card wallet. Everything you need for this section is in front of me. You're going to need your prepared exterior with the braiding already attached. You're going to need your prepared lining piece, your foam, as well as your frame. Now, before I move everything aside and show you how to continue with the foam, I do want to mention something. You will want to take a credit card or a business card or something and make sure that all of your slots are free and clear before you do any kind of stitching. Also, the distance between this credit card area, the fold, and the top of the binding will vary between 1 3/8 and 1.5 inch. So you want to check that as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear everything away, and we're going to prepare the wrong side of our exterior as well as our foam and get everything set into place to put our interior in. So I have my interior piece in front of me and my foam and a few clips as well as my frame. So first of all, I'm going to flip this piece over so that the right side is down. And what you need to do is you need to go ahead and make some markings on the wrong side of your exterior. First of all, you want to mark center on the top and the bottom area. So basically across that top and across that bottom, you need to measure that in and find center. You also need to draw a line 3/8 of an inch down and parallel to that top edge, as well as 3/8 of an inch up and parallel with that bottom edge. So I've gone ahead and done that. You also need to mark center on your foam right here and right here, not on the paper side with that where the adhesive is, but on the foam side, because we're going to now peel the paper off of this and set this in place. Now, if you do not have the peel and stick foam, then you can go ahead and glue your other foam into position. So what I do is I fold this paper back about 2 to 3 inches and then crease it. And I want to align that center of my foam with the center of my exterior. And I want to make sure that this edge of my foam is aligned with that line I drew. So I want to just get it really close as possible. And then before I take the rest of the paper off, I want to make sure that I am lined up and straight, which I am. So I'm now going to peel that paper off a little at a time, and I'm going to smooth this out so that I don't get any kind of bubbling or puckers till I get to the end. And I'm going to make sure that that is nicely flat, and I'm also going to check to make sure that I haven't got any excess. Now I do have a little bit here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this foam back just a little bit, flip this down, and I'm going to actually trim back just a little bit of that foam to make sure that it's sitting well within that line. So trim that off like that and get that back into position just like that. I'm going to use a poly roller and I'm going to roll this foam to make sure that I remove any bubbles. I'm going to flip it to the right side and do the same thing. You don't want to have any kind of bubbles or puckers in this wallet at all. So I've now smoothed everything out, as you can see, and I'm going to flip this to the wrong side. We now need to place our lining down on top of our foam. So before we do that, though, we need to mark center right at this edge right here and center down here so that we can make sure that everything is nicely aligned. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I know this is 4.5, so that makes that center 2 1/4, and the same down here, 2 1/4. This just keeps everything nice and straight and perfectly aligned. So now what I want to do is I want to flip this interior over, and I'm going to apply some fabric glue around all 4 edges, just like this. Not a lot. And I'm going to feel where that lip is of the binding, and the lip of where that credit card is. And I'm just going to run another bead across those areas. I'm going to smooth this down so that it's not too thick and will penetrate through my fabric. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this lining piece so that the glue side is on top of my foam. And I'm going to align that center along that bottom edge, just like that. And if I get any glue on here, then I can just use a cloth, damp cloth, and wipe it off, making sure that I don't get any glue on my fabric. And get that set into position, just like this. Gonna poly roll that. I am going to hammer my bulky areas later on, but before I do, I want to make sure what's called a dry fit. So I want to make sure that my frame is going to fit within this area. So I'm going to take this edge and I'm going to pull it over as tight as I possibly can, using that interior raw edge as my guide. So I'm going to pull it nice and tight. I'm going to clip further down. I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom edge and the other side as well. What we're doing is we're making sure that this frame is going to fit, because as I said, if you happen to have purchased one that's not 4.5, you may have a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this frame, and I'm going to make sure that the frame parts are located exactly where I need them to be. So my flip lock is at the end where my credit card is. So I'm just going to kind of look. I'm not going to set this into place because it won't fit in without being set together, which I will show you how to do later on. So that is even, and I'm going to put the area where my open hole is, and I want to make sure that that's going to fit, and yes, it's going to fit. Now, if for some reason you happen to have a frame that is 4.3 inches and not 4.5, then what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to trim back your interior a little bit. So in other words, this is 4.5. This frame is 4.5. So what you will most likely have to do is trim back this piece. So I would recommend that you pull this back before it sets into place. Take it off, trim that down by at least probably 1/8 of an inch, a 1/16 on each side, but I definitely would go 1/8 of an inch, and then it should fit in. The other option is to angle these corners up here and down here so that it fits into place, but it could bow your wallet. So be prepared for that just in case, and that's just a little bit of a tip to help you along the way. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold everything up into position so that we can do our stitching. You're going to take a piece of 1/4 inch double-sided tape, and you're going to apply this tape approximately 1/8 of an inch away from that raw edge. So that tape is going on the wrong side of your exterior side, just like that. I'll put another piece over here, keeping it approximately 1/8 of an inch away from that raw edge, just like that. I'm actually going to take the poly roller and I'm just going to give this a nice roll to make sure it's well secured. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel off the tape off one side. We're going to start with one side, and I'm going to use my finger. If you happen to have a bone folder, then you can use a bone folder and get underneath and bring it over to the side. But I find that my finger, I can feel everything with my finger and I know exactly what's happening. So I'm going to bring that piece under. So what I want to do is I want to get that side stuck to that raw side. So I'm just going to kind of bring it up and fold that over. So what I'm doing is I'm using the edge of that interior as my guide, and I'm using my finger to push down on that interior to make sure that it's staying well in position. And I want to make sure that I am well over. So I'm pulling it and tugging it. Now we're not going to be sewing this until we do another dry fit, but basically I've pulled that whole piece to the side. I'm going to swing this around and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to bring this piece up. Now this area here with the credit card can be bulky, so you might as well pull as hard as you can to get that into position. So you're bringing that up and kind of moving it over just like that. And again, if you happen to have a bone folder, you can definitely go ahead and use that. Now, before we go to the machine and stitch this in place, we want to make sure that it is going to fit. So once again, we're going to align these pieces. So I want to align this at the end, and I know that's going to fit in, and that's the vinyl end with that open piece. And the same thing down here. Now this could be a little bit trickier, but if you happen to have too much, then I would bring that back a little bit and pull it a little bit tighter so that you can make sure that it's going to fit. Now there's areas right here that are bulky and right here. So I would highly recommend that you take a poly mallet and you hammer those areas really, really well. And same as down here where your braid is, you're going to need to hammer that really well as well, so that it can be flat when you go to sew. So I will do that hammering off camera. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to do my stitching. And I'm going to stitch this from the right side. My stitch is going to be 3/8 of an inch in from this folded edge. So I'm going to back stitch well up at the top, and I'm going to come all the way down to the end and back stitch, and I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. You want to back stitch well down at both ends, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how you trim off these sides, and then we're going to put our frame on. So I'm going to go do my hammering, and then I'm going to go to the machine, so I'll see you over there. So I'm now over at the machine, and I have hammered all of my bulky areas on the side, made sure everything is nice and even and tucked under. And now I'm going to go ahead and top stitch those sides in place. And I'm using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from that folded edge in, and I'm going to back stitch well at the top and the bottom. So let's get this stitching done so that we can get our frame on. Okay, that stitching is all complete. As you can see, it turned out beautiful. And now what we need to do is we need to trim back this vinyl, and we want to get as close to that stitch line as possible. So I'm just going to pull this vinyl back a little bit, and I'm just going to use my finger to smooth it out so that I can get it prepared to trim. Now I'm going to be using a pair of scissors that have a really sharp point on them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to begin my cut, and I'm not going to do this because then you'll see a lot of chopping when you do that cut. So what I want to do is I want to take my scissors into that tip of, so I want to place the tip of the scissors into that vinyl. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide it. So I'm going to be pulling on this edge downwards so that it helps me slide this into along that edge. So I want to make sure that I'm about a 1/16 of an inch away from that stitching. Be very careful when you get to any of these folded areas, and make sure that you don't catch the scissors under there. And I'm just pulling that along just like that. Just like that, so you can see how nice and neat that looks. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Once again, being very careful not to catch any of the folds from your credit card or your binding piece. Now, if it helps, you can actually place a piece of tape Scotch tape on top of those areas so that your scissors will slide nice and easily along there. That was a tip from Teresa Burgess from our admin from our Bag Makers Workshop, and I thank her very much for that. So now this is what your piece will look like at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to now set our frame in place. And the way we do that is by taking a piece of Scotch tape and we place that across the top or the bottom, just like that. And you don't want to be any more than 1/4 of an inch down from that raw edge. I'm going to flip this to the other side and I'm going to do the same thing on this side, making sure that that tape does not go past 1/4 of an inch. Our frames are approximately 3/8 of an inch, so you don't want that to be further than your frame. I'm now going to take and clip off that excess on that end, and we're going to retrieve the frame that has the hole in it because we're now going to punch out our hole. So what you want to do is you want to set this frame now on top, so you see how well it fits, and you want to pull it down, pushing that Scotch tape. So you don't want to remove that top Scotch tape because that's what helps you keep everything perfectly aligned. You want to push that down into position, and then you want to trace around that opening so that you can see the area where you need to punch out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my punch and my poly board and a hammer, and I'm going to come back and show you how to punch this hole out. Okay, I have retrieved a hammer, a steel plate, and my poly board, and I'm now going to punch out that area for that frame. So this is a 5/8 of an inch by, I do believe, 1/2 an inch cutting die that came from an Amazon kit, and it's a perfect size. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're aligned perfectly along that outside line. And I'm going to set this in place just like this. Now again, the camera may shake, and I just punched that out. I didn't quite get all the way through. There we go. And I just hooked a little bit, so they'll snip that to the side. And you can see this is what I removed, and I have removed some of the braiding. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to set this aside since I don't need this any longer, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So as you can see, we have cut through the braiding. Now I'm going to get my poly mallet back again, and I'm going to trim a little bit more because I don't find that it's totally centered there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit more off that side because I don't like that not being centered, just a little bit. And it doesn't matter if you take a little bit too much on the sides, you just do not want to take too much on the end. So there we go. I've taken that little bit extra, so now I've centered that braid. Now you are going to notice that you have cut through there, and you do have the double-sided tape that's holding that in place, but not all layers. So you may have a few layers that you need to add a little bit of glue to that edge, and I actually place some glue all the way along this whole area right in here to secure it. And I'm just going to smooth that into right in there. And you can actually put a clip on there and let that dry before you add your frame. But I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to add my frame. So I'm going to place this with the right side down, and I'm going to add this frame. And remember, this is the vinyl side that you have punched that hole through. So before I place that on, I know it fits. There is some plastic usually on the outside of these frames. So what you want to do is you want to remove that plastic so that you can set those screws into position. And you want to make sure the screws are on the inside of the wallet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some glue down inside that track. Not a lot, just a little bit, and along the side edges here. and then I'm going to hit it down to make sure that glue tracks down along that side. And then I'm going to place this frame into position. Once again, making sure that I tuck this vinyl underneath, and I make sure that the braiding is also tucked underneath, just like that. Now, if you find it's hard to get yours on, if it's a little bit wider, you can open these wings up with a needle nose pliers and get it set into place. You can open them both up and slide the whole thing on if you want, but basically that's what that's going to look like. I'm just going to take that back a little bit so that I can remove that little thread that's just driving me a little batty there. So this is now nicely centered, and I actually have my fingernail that I use, and I push that up into position like that. Flip this back, making sure that's all tucked in really, really well. I'm going to get my star screwdriver, and I'm going to begin by putting one end on first. So I'm going to hold my wallet, and I'm going to bring down that frame so it's nice and tight. I'm going to go counterclockwise to set my threads, and then I'm going to screw this in place. If you have a hard time getting through there, but it's only little short screws, you can actually take your awl and just make a little bit of a hole, but be very careful you don't put any dimples on the other side of that frame. The next screw I'm going to set is going to be the one on the other side. And again, I'm going to push that frame down into position counterclockwise first to lock the threads in, and then I'm going to lock that whole screw right into place. I'm going to do the same thing on these two, and then I'm going to tape this edge and get the frame ready to place into position on that end. So now that I have set this end, I'm going to set this end as well. I have placed my tape on top, as you can see, making sure it has not gone lower than 1/4 of an inch. And I have pulled the plastic off my frame. Now this area is going to be a little thick, so you're going to need to make sure you hammer this well if you're having any kinds of problems getting this frame on. Also, you can take some needle nose pliers and pull open those side pieces and slide it in position if you have to. You want to make sure that it's going to fit before you add the glue. So I'm just going to do a dry fit, and you can see that's working for me. So I'm going to lift that off, and I'm now going to apply some fabric glue down into that track. Not a lot, I don't want it gooping out by any means. And kicking it down so that it goes down inside well. And I'm going to now place that frame onto the credit card end, and I'm taking my fingers and I'm pushing that down into position. I'm going to look at the other side, make sure that that braiding is well tucked up and under there. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to begin with the one on the end and counterclockwise to set the threads, and then down into position. And then I'm going to do the outer side and the two, and then we'll come back and I'll show you exactly what your new wallet looks like. So there you have it. This is your wallet all ready to go. This is the right side, frame's been attached. Now I would recommend you let this set up and dry for 24 hours before you actually fold it permanently into place, but I am going to show you what this looks like. So what you want to do is you want to bring, so I put my fingers here to smooth that center out. You're going to bring this up, place that flip block into position, and then press down on that, and there is your gorgeous wallet. Isn't that cool? So now what you want to do is, if you get too much in this wallet, if you get it really full, or if you happen to have a hard time using that flip lock, I would highly recommend that you flip that lock upwards so that it doesn't open with too much in it. As well, it's easier to get in and out when it is in the upper position. So there you have it. That ends all of the video tutorials for this Mini Bifold credit card wallet. I hope you have enjoyed this, and we're going to be doing video tutorials for the fabric version as well. So if you want to do the fabric version, go ahead and go into that section for the fabric wallet. But this is how your Mini Bifold wallet looks with vinyl, when using vinyl, leather, or cork. So thank you very much, and I can't wait to see your fantastic pictures on all of your wallets and what you've chosen for your exteriors, interiors, and your braiding.